Leo's hand trembled. It hovered over a polished chrome dial, the numbers on its face stark and unforgiving. His thumb grazed the cool metal, the tip of it resting just above the 6. On the monitor before him, his wife, Clara, shivered violently. Her breath fogged in the frigid air of her sterile white room as the temperature plummeted. She wrapped her arms around herself, teeth chattering, her eyes wide with a desperate, unspoken plea. Then, a voice, automated and devoid of all human warmth, chimed from hidden speakers. "Daily compliance window closing in 5 minutes. Please advance stimulus to level 7 to continue the protocol." Leo squeezed his eyes shut, a silent scream clawing at the back of his throat. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. None of this. But to understand the terrible choice that bound Leo to this control panel, to witness the unraveling of everything he held dear, one must first look back to a life suffocated by the slow, inexorable squeeze of financial ruin. It was late autumn 2029. The city outside their cramped apartment window was a bruised, gray landscape, mirroring the despair that had settled deep within Leo Vance and his wife, Clara. The air in their home was thick with unspoken fears and the acrid smell of stale coffee. Another eviction notice lay crumpled on the counter, a stark white flag of surrender. The phone, a harbinger of doom, rang with the relentless cadence of debt collectors, each tone a fresh stab at their already fraying nerves. Leo would often mute it, burying his face in his hands. The silence of impending catastrophe, almost worse than the noise. He remembered a different silence, one filled with the rustle of leaves in their old backyard, Clara's laughter echoing as he chased her with a garden hose. He remembered the comforting weight of her head on his shoulder on Sunday mornings, the quiet joy of a shared dream. Now, their dreams were dust. Their savings, their future, their very dignity had evaporated with Leo's failed tech startup. He had promised Clara the world and delivered only a mountain of debt. One desperate night, huddled together on their worn couch, illuminated only by the laptop screen, a peculiar ad flickered into view. The Panacea Project. Erase your worries. Secure your future. High compensation for short-term endurance study. It promised millions, a chance to reset, to reclaim their lost life. It felt too good to be true, a shimmering mirage in their desert of despair. But what choice did they have? Hope, however faint, was a potent drug. They applied online, a simple form asking for basic biometrics and a vague questionnaire about their pain tolerance and psychological resilience. Within days, an email arrived with coordinates for an unmarked facility on the outskirts of the city, along with strict instructions. The Panacea Project facility was a monument to oppressive sterility. Brutalist concrete formed a stark, labyrinthine exterior, leading to an interior of pristine white corridors that echoed with their every footstep. The air was dry, cool, and antiseptic, scrubbing away any sense of comfort or familiarity. They were separated almost immediately. Clara went first, led away by a silent attendant. Leo's turn came soon after. He was ushered into a small, windowless room where a woman with hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin sat behind a minimalist desk. Dr. Finch. Her eyes, sharp and unblinking, scrutinized him. Her voice was flat, devoid of inflection. "State your name and purpose for being here." "Leo Vance. My wife, Clara, and we're here for the Panacea Project, the endurance study." His voice sounded small, uncertain, in the vast clinical silence. Dr. Finch nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. "The protocol requires strict adherence. Any deviation will result in immediate disqualification and a substantial financial penalty. Do you understand the terms? Leo swallowed hard. Yes, we understand. Good. Now you will be taken to your chamber. You will be monitored at all times. Privacy is a luxury not afforded within the scope of this project. She paused, her gaze unwavering. Do you have any questions, Mr. Vance? He had 1,000, but none he dared voice. No, doctor. He was then led to another room, this one slightly less stark, where Dr. Sharma awaited. Dr. Sharma possessed a deceptive warmth, a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mr. Vance, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Dr. Sharma. My role is to oversee your well-being throughout this study. He gestured to a comfortable-looking chair. Please make yourself at home, such as it is. We understand this is a significant undertaking. Your dedication is commendable. Thank you, Doctor. Leo felt a flicker of relief. At least someone here seemed human. Now, regarding your specific role, Dr. Sharma began, his voice dropping slightly. You'll be participating in a study examining the effects of prolonged isolation on cognitive function. Your wife, Clara, will be in a separate parallel study, focused on individual pain tolerance. Total isolation is key for you, hence the absence of contact with Clara. It's crucial for the integrity of the data. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. This is important, Mr. Vance. It's for science and, of course, for your future. He spoke of his future, and Leo saw Clara's face, her hopeful eyes. He saw the life they could rebuild. I understand, Leo said, the words feeling heavy. Before being led to their respective chambers, they were allowed one final moment together, a brief, sterile embrace in a monitored hallway. Clara's hand clutched his, her touch a desperate anchor in the clinical coldness. It's only for a few weeks, Leo, she whispered, her voice trembling. Then it's over. We'll be free. Leo squeezed her hand back, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. We'll be free, Clara, I promise. He watched her disappear down a brightly lit corridor, her figure shrinking until she was swallowed by the endless white. A cold dread, a premonition, settled in his stomach. Leo was led to a room smaller and even more sterile than the interview rooms. It contained a bed, a small table, and a single large monitor. The monitor was dark. He sat on the bed, the mattress unyielding beneath him. The door hissed shut, and a soft click indicated it was locked. Alone. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket that pressed down on him. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then a soft chime. The monitor flickered to life, revealing a live feed. On the screen, Clara. She was in a room identical to his, just as stark and white. She sat on her own bed, looking around, a flicker of anxiety in her eyes. Leo felt a surge of relief to see her, quickly replaced by a wave of confusion. Hadn't Dr. Sharma said he would be in total isolation? Then the true twist. Another voice. The same automated, emotionless tone from the opening. Participant A, Leo Vance. Welcome to the Threshold Protocol. Your designated role is not one of isolation. You are the administrator of the protocol for Participant B, Clara Vance. Leo's breath hitched. He stared at the screen, then at a small console beneath it that he hadn't noticed before. It had a single, large, polished chrome dial, just like the one he'd seen in the initial hook. Labeled Stimulus Level, it ranged from 1 to 10. Beside it, a single button marked Administer. The automated voice continued, unwavering. The objective is to guide participant B through escalating levels of stimulus for the duration of the study. Each day, the stimulus level must be advanced. Failure to do so will result in immediate disqualification for both participants and the activation of the financial penalty clause as agreed upon in your signed contract. The penalty is equivalent to the maximum potential compensation. A massive financial penalty, worsening their ruin. The words echoed in his mind, a death knell. He felt a sickening lurch in his gut. This was no isolation study. This was a horror. He was not a participant. He was an executioner. Current protocol requires stimulus level 1 to be engaged. Please administer level 1. His hand, already trembling, reached for the dial. He had to, for Clara, for their future. He closed his eyes, took a ragged breath, and slowly, with agonizing deliberateness, turned the dial to 1. It clicked into place with a sound that seemed deafening in the silence of his room. On the monitor, in Clara's room, a barely audible, annoying hum began to fill the air. It was a low, insistent vibration, just enough to be irritating, to permeate the silence. Clara frowned, cocking her head, her eyes scanning her sterile surroundings. She shifted uncomfortably on her bed, trying to locate the source of the subtle annoyance. Leo watched, his face a mask of horror and guilt. He had done this to her. The days blurred into a horrifying monotony. Each morning, the automated voice would announce the opening of the compliance window, urging Leo to advance the stimulus. And each morning, with a growing sense of dread, he would obey. Day 2. He turned the dial to 2. The hum in Clara's room intensified, vibrating through the thin walls, an annoying drone that burrowed into her skull. She tried covering her ears, then paced the small room, her agitation clear even on the grainy monitor. Leo watched her, a knot of nausea twisting in his stomach. He felt every vibration, every flicker of her frustration, as if it were his own. Day 3, Level 3. The drone became a piercing whine, a high-frequency assault on the senses. In addition, an intermittent bright strobe light began to flash at irregular intervals from a fixture above Clara's head. She cried out, shielding her eyes, her movements becoming jerky, disoriented. Leo watched her, a knot of nausea twisting in his stomach. He felt every vibration, every flicker of her frustration, as if it were his own. Day 3, Level 3. The drone became a piercing whine, a high-frequency assault on the senses. In addition, an intermittent bright strobe light began to flash at irregular intervals from a fixture above Clara's head. She cried out, shielding her eyes, her movements becoming jerky, disoriented. Leo could feel the sharp, cold edge of panic begin to chip away at his own composure. His hands shook as he retreated from the console, burying his face in his pillow, the image of her suffering searing itself into his mind. Day 4, Level 4. The whine escalated into a grating screech, a sound like metal rending metal, coupled with the relentless, blinding strobe. And then the temperature began to drop. Not drastically at first, just a subtle, creeping cold that made Clara shiver, her breath visible in the air. She huddled into herself, rubbing her arms, her earlier frustration replaced by a quiet physical discomfort. Leo was a nervous wreck, his sleep fractured by nightmares, his waking hours consumed by a relentless cycle of guilt and fear. He couldn't eat, he couldn't think. All he could do was watch her. He watched the love of his life suffer, rationalizing it, each torturous tick of the dial, as their only way out. Day 5, Level 5. The room was now distinctly cold, the metallic shriek a constant assault. Clara pulled her thin blanket tight around her, her body curled into a fetal position on the bed. Her eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, darted around the room, searching for an explanation, for an escape. Leo's internal conflict was a screaming inferno. He saw the pain he was inflicting, the suffering etching itself onto her beloved face, and he wanted to scream, to break the glass, to beg her forgiveness. But then the automatic voice would chime, reminding him of the penalty, of their irreversible ruin, and the hand would twitch, the dial would turn. It was on day 6, just after he had reluctantly advanced the dial to 6, plunging Clara's room into the frigid cold that began this story, that Dr. Sharma paid Leo a visit. The door to Leo's observation room hissed open, breaking the chilling silence. Dr. Sharma stepped in, his practiced smile firmly in place, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. "Mr. Vance, how are you holding up?" His voice was smooth, deceptively empathetic. Leo flinched, pulling himself away from the monitor. I'm fine, doctor." The lie tasted like ash. Dr. Sharma nodded slowly, walking closer to the console. He glanced at the monitor, at Clara, who was now huddled in a corner, shivering violently. "She's a resilient one, your Clara. Very impressive. Most participants show signs of breaking by this point." He looked back at Leo, his smile fading slightly, replaced by a look of concern. "But you, Mr. Vance, you seem to be struggling. It's just difficult watching her." Leo's voice was hoarse. "Of course it is." Dr. Sharma's tone was soothing, a practiced balm. "This is not an easy study. We designed it to be rigorous, a true test of endurance, of commitment. But remember, Mr. Vance, the ultimate goal, the prize, the freedom it offers you both." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, potent and heavy. "Imagine, Mr. Vance, a life free of debt, a fresh start. This temporary discomfort, it's a small price to pay, isn't it, for true liberation?" He placed a hand on Leo's shoulder, a gesture of false comfort. "Think of it this way. Every time you advance that dial, you are one step closer to your freedom, one step closer to rescuing her. It's an act of love, Mr. Vance, a profound sacrifice for her well-being." Leo stared at the doctor, then back at Clara, huddled and trembling. An act of love? He felt a fresh wave of self-loathing. But the pain, what is the purpose of it? Dr. Sharma sighed, a patient, knowing sound. "The human psyche is complex, Mr. Vance. We are testing the limits of moral compromise under duress. The protocol is designed to push boundaries, to reveal the true resilience of the human spirit. And your commitment, your willingness to endure this, it's paramount for the data, for science, and for your shared future. Remember that." He gave Leo another reassuring pat, then turned and left, the door hissing shut, leaving Leo once again in the suffocating silence, burdened by the weight of Dr. Sharma's manipulative words. In her room, Clara's resilience began to morph into something else entirely. She had initially tried to rationalize the escalating discomforts as part of a randomized, if cruel, study. But as the days wore on, as the sounds intensified, the lights flashed more aggressively, and the cold deepened, a pattern began to emerge. The stimuli didn't feel random, they felt reactive. When she cried out, the screech seemed to sharpen. When she tried to ignore the strobe, it would flicker faster. When she huddled into herself, the cold would bite harder. She began to test her theory. She would defiantly sit upright, staring directly at the camera, and the stimulus would spike. She would slump in despair, and it would momentarily soften. This wasn't a randomized protocol. This was personal. Someone was watching her. Someone was controlling this. And if someone was watching, then perhaps someone was also listening. One evening, after enduring an agonizing sequence of high-pitched static and sudden blinding flashes, Clara slowly, deliberately began to tap on the floor with her heel. One tap, a pause, two taps, another pause. She looked directly into the lens of the monitoring camera, her eyes wide with a desperate intelligence. She tried to spell out a message in Morse code or some approximation of it, her face etched with grim determination. A-R-U-T-H-E-R? The hope in her eyes was almost unbearable to Leo. Leo, watching from his control room, felt a cold shock grip him. He understood. She was trying to communicate, and the protocol was explicit. Any attempt at communication, any deviation, would lead to immediate disqualification and the penalty. He saw the subtle red light on his console begin to flash, a warning. The automated voice had warned him. He had to stop her. His hand flew to the console. There was a secondary button, one he had hoped he would never have to touch, labeled simply, Intervention. He hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest like a trapped bird. He saw Clara's determined taps, her plea for connection. He saw their ruined life, the crushing debt. He saw her, laughing in their old kitchen, dancing with flour on her nose. He saw her now, shivering, tapping, pleading. His own hand, a betrayer, slammed down on the intervention button. A violent, agonizing jolt of electricity surged through Clara's room. She screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore through Leo's ears and convulsed, her body arching in a horrifying spasm before collapsing onto the floor. The image on the monitor flickered, then stabilized. Clara lay motionless, a faint tremor still running through her limbs. Leo recoiled, gasping for breath, his own body shaking uncontrollably. He had done it. He had sent that bolt of pure agony through her. The silence in his room was no longer suffocating. It was deafening, filled with the echo of Clara's scream. From that moment, Leo's psyche began to fracture. Sleep became a torment, filled with kaleidoscopic nightmares of Clara's contorted face, her screams replaying on an endless loop. He saw flashbacks, not of their happy life together, but of the moments just before disaster, the confident launch of his startup, the naive optimism, the slow, agonizing descent into debt. He was a ghost haunting his own life, watching the woman he loved suffer, a prisoner of his own making, his own fear. In her chamber, Clara, however, was no longer merely a victim. The shock had been horrific, a searing line drawn in the sand, but it had also been confirmation. Someone was there. Someone was actively controlling her experience. And if someone was controlling it, then there were rules, a game. Her sole focus shifted. She stopped fighting the stimuli in futile acts of defiance. Instead, she began to observe, to analyze, to understand, to discern the patterns. Her intelligence, once a source of shared joy, now became her only weapon, her only hope of deciphering the cruel, invisible rules of the Threshold Protocol. She might be imprisoned, but she refused to be broken. Not yet. Leo, meanwhile, continued to exist in a fog of guilt and dread, each morning's demand to advance the dial another turn of the screw in his own internal torture. The numbers on the dial climbed relentlessly. 7, 8. The cold became unbearable, the sounds a cacophony of torment, the flashing lights a ceaseless assault. Clara's physical state deteriorated, her face gaunt, her movements slow and deliberate, conserving energy. Yet her eyes, when she looked at the camera, were no longer pleading. They were calculating, resolute. He watched her on level 8, shivering, her lips blue. The automated voice chimed. Daily compliance window closing in 5 minutes. Please advance stimulus to level 9 to continue the protocol. He knew what level 9 entailed. He'd seen the next specification. It was another escalation in physical torment, a new layer of suffering. He didn't know how much more of this she or he could take. This was not about love anymore. This was about survival, a desperate, spiraling plunge into the abyss with no end in sight. The money, the promise of freedom, felt like a cruel joke. All that remained was the grinding, relentless horror of the threshold protocol. He stared at the monitor, his own face reflected back at him, distorted by the light. Clara, a huddled, trembling silhouette, her lips a shocking shade of blue against her ashen skin. And then, the voice. Daily compliance window closing in 5 minutes. Please advance stimulus to level 9 to continue the protocol. Level 9. A new escalation, a new layer of suffering he knew he was about to inflict. His stomach churned, a raw, acidic burn. He felt the cold in his own bones, the phantom echoes of the high-pitched static, the piercing strobe. He felt Clara's suffering as if it were his own, yet he was the architect of her pain. His hand, heavy as lead, moved towards the dial. It was no longer a question of if, but when. The penalty, the debt, the ruined life. It pressed down on him, a physical weight, forcing his trembling fingers to grasp the cool metal. With a shuddering gasp, Leo turned the dial to 9. The click was deafening. On the monitor, Clara's room plunged into an eerie silence, even colder than before. Then, the silence was broken not by sound, but by sensation. A pervasive, bone-deep vibration began to emanate from every surface, the floor, the walls, the ceiling. It wasn't loud, but it was relentless, rattling her teeth, blurring her vision, making her very atoms feel like they were coming undone. Simultaneously, a faint, sickly green light pulsed from the ceiling at an irregular, nauseating rhythm, washing the sterile white walls in a ghastly hue. It was a complete sensory assault, designed not to overwhelm with noise, but to disorient, to strip away all sense of grounding and reality. Clara screamed, a strangled sound that was swallowed by the pervasive vibration. She clutched her head, trying to make the world stop spinning, trying to escape the unseen tormentor that gnawed at her very being. She stumbled, falling to her knees, her body convulsing not from pain, but from the unbearable disequilibrium. Leo watched, helpless, his own body mirroring her reactions, his mind screaming in unison with her silent cries. His breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. He wanted to rip the dial off the console, to smash the screen, to tear down the walls separating them. But he remained frozen, a prisoner of his fear, a puppet to the automated voice and the crushing weight of their financial ruin. Days bled into an agonizing eternity. Clara's physical state deteriorated rapidly. Her gaunt face was now etched with a profound exhaustion, her eyes sunken, ringed with shadows. She moved with the slow, deliberate care of someone constantly anticipating the next assault, her body conserving every ounce of energy. The relentless vibrations and the sickening green light were a constant, insidious torment, never allowing her a moment of true rest or mental clarity. Yet, something in her gaze had solidified, When she looked at the camera, her eyes were no longer pleading, no longer merely calculating. They held a raw, primal defiance. She might be breaking, but she was not broken. Not yet. Leo, meanwhile, was a ghost. He barely ate, barely slept. His skin was pasty, his eyes bloodshot, haunted by the images on the screen, by the echoes of her unheard screams. He existed in a perpetual state of dread, each dawn a new torment, each command from the automated voice a fresh turn of the screw. He replayed their life together, fragments of forgotten moments flickering through his fractured mind. Clara's easy laughter as they walked hand in hand through autumn leaves, the warmth of her body pressed against his as they dreamed of a future that now seemed like a cruel mirage. Each happy memory was a blade, twisting in the wound of his current complicity. He was slowly, irrevocably, destroying the very thing he claimed to be saving. He remembered a quiet Saturday morning years ago, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, sunlight streaming through their kitchen window, Clara humming softly, kneading dough for bread, flour dusting her nose. He had come up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, burying his face in her hair. She'd leaned back into his embrace, sighing contentedly. "This," she'd whispered, "this is everything." Now that memory was a torture, a stark contrast to the emaciated, vibrating figure on the screen. Her world a nauseating green haze. He had sacrificed everything for the promise of that everything again, and in doing so, had destroyed it forever. Then, one morning, a shift. The door to Leo's observation room hissed open. It wasn't Dr. Sharma with his practiced empathy, nor the cold efficiency of an attendant. It was Dr. Finch. Her sharp eyes scanned Leo, taking in his disheveled appearance, his gaunt face. She showed no recognition, no empathy, just a clinical assessment. Behind her, Dr. Sharma hovered, a shadow of his former reassuring self, his usual smile absent, replaced by a grim, professional neutrality. "Mr. Vance," Dr. Finch's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "The threshold protocol is nearing its conclusion." Leo flinched, pulling himself away from the monitor, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Conclusion? Is it over?" A fragile spark of hope ignited within him, quickly extinguished by her next words. "Not quite. There is one final stage, a mercy ending, as we term it." Her gaze was unwavering, fixed on the console, on the dial currently set to 9. "The protocol requires one last advancement." Leo swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. To level 10? The number was unlabeled on the dial, a blank space after the 9, implying something beyond even the current unimaginable suffering. "Correct," Dr. Finch nodded, a barely perceptible movement. "The final, extreme stimulus. Once administered, the protocol will terminate immediately. The study will conclude, and the compensation will be dispersed according to your contract." She paused, her eyes finally meeting his, utterly devoid of warmth. "Failure to administer level 10 now will result in immediate disqualification and the full financial penalty as per the signed agreement. This is your final compliance window, Mr. Vance." The words echoed, a death knell. Full financial penalty. It was the trap, sprung tighter than ever. He looked at Clara on the monitor. She was huddled against the wall, her eyes, though exhausted, now fixed directly on the camera. It was as if she knew, as if she could feel the weight of this final horrifying decision hanging in the air. Her lips moved, forming a single, silent word, a desperate, unspoken plea that Leo could read in her eyes. "Please." Leo's hand, clammy with sweat, closed around the dial. His thumb brushed the 9. The space beyond, the blank, terrifying 10, beckoned like an abyss. A storm of conflicting emotions raged within him. Fear, a cold, paralyzing dread of the financial ruin that awaited them if he failed. Love, a desperate, gut-wrenching need to save Clara, to end her suffering, even if it meant inflicting this final, unimaginable horror. Guilt, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate him, the realization of what he had become. Rationalization, the whispered lies he had told himself for days. It's for her, it's for us, it's the only way out. His mind flashed back again, a torrent of memories. Clara's laughter on their honeymoon, bright and clear under a Tuscan sun. Her hand in his, warm and strong, as they navigated a crowded street festival. Her tear-streaked face after his startup failed, but her words so full of unwavering support. "We'll get through this, Leo, together." He saw her now, those same beloved eyes, wide with a silent, heart-wrenching plea, her face a canvas of his own inflicted torment. He squeezed his eyes shut. A raw, guttural scream tore from his throat, a sound born of pure anguish and self-loathing. It wasn't a scream of defiance, but of surrender, of a man broken beyond repair. With a desperate, violent surge of energy, he slammed his hand down, shoving the dial past 9, all the way to the unlabeled extreme 10. The solid click resonated through the room, a sound of finality, of irrevocable destruction. On the monitor, Clara's room was plunged into an instantaneous darkness. The sickening green light vanished. The vibration ceased. Every sensor, every light, every monitor flickered, then died, replaced by a dead, black screen. The test was over. The silence that descended upon Leo's room was absolute, heavy, and infinitely more terrifying than any sound. Leo collapsed into the chair, his body trembling uncontrollably, gasping for air that felt thin and acrid. He stared at the black screen, his vision blurred by tears that refused to fall. What had he done? What had he become? A cold hand touched his shoulder. Dr. Sharma, no longer feigning empathy, merely handed him a sterile, pre-filled syringe. "Standard sedative, Mr. Vance, for your comfort. The protocol is complete. Congratulations! You have successfully completed the threshold protocol." He felt the prick in his arm, the cool rush of the drug. A wave of exhaustion, deep and all-consuming, washed over him, pulling him into a dark, dreamless void. There was no relief, no joy, only the crushing weight of what he had done. When Leo awoke, he was no longer in the sterile observation room. He lay on a pristine, unfamiliar bed in a luxurious suite. The air was clean, faintly scented with something vaguely floral. Sunlight, real sunlight, streamed through a large window overlooking a manicured cityscape. It was lavish, opulent, and utterly desolate. A tablet lay on the bedside table. He picked it up with a trembling hand. A notification flashed across the screen. Threshold protocol compensation deposited. Account balance $10 million. $10 million. The money, it was real. But the number, once a shimmering beacon of hope, now felt like an epitaph. It was the price of a soul, paid in installments of agony. He wandered through the empty penthouse, each room a testament to a life purchased at an unbearable cost. Marble floors, gleaming surfaces, bespoke furniture. It was the dream they had chased, the one he had promised Clara. Yet there was no Clara. The vast space echoed with a terrible, unshakable silence. He looked out over the city, a sprawling tapestry of indifference. The world outside was no longer bleak. It was he who was bleak. He saw her then, standing by the window. Clara. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, but she was whole. Physically, she was intact. He took a hesitant step towards her, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. "Clara?" His voice was a raw whisper, barely audible in the cavernous room. She turned slowly, her gaze meeting his. There was no anger, no accusation, only a profound, aching emptiness. She looked through him, not at him. Her eyes, once so full of light and love, were now utterly devoid of emotion, like still pools reflecting nothing. The trauma had scoured her clean, leaving behind a husk. We did it, Clara," he stammered, the words catching in his throat. "We're free. The money." She nodded, a slow, detached movement. "Yes, Leo, we're free." Her voice was flat, toneless, utterly unlike the vibrant, warm sound he remembered. And what did it cost? Her gaze drifted away, out the window, to some distant, unseen point. She didn't expect an answer. She already knew. They lived in the penthouse, separate, together. The vast space amplified their distance, their silence. He tried to talk, to explain, to apologize, but the words felt hollow, meaningless. She would listen, sometimes, with that same blank expression, or simply leave the room. Her resilience, once a source of strength, had been twisted into an impenetrable shield, protecting a core that was no longer accessible to him. He was a stranger to her, a tormentor in her memories, and the love that had once bound them together was now a raw, bleeding wound, irrevocably shattered. The money bought them luxury, but it condemned them to isolation, side by side. Months later, the autumn chill had returned, mirroring the constant cold within Leo. He sat in the vast, silent living room, a single lamp casting a circle of light on his face. The only sound was the distant hum of the city, a dull reminder of a life he no longer felt part of. He picked up a thick, prestigious psychological journal from the polished glass coffee table. It was a recent publication, its cover sleek and academic. He hadn't subscribed. It must have been sent to the penthouse. His eyes scanned the title, printed in bold, stark lettering. The Threshold Protocol, Deconstructing Altruism Under Duress, authored by Dr. Alistair Finch. A chill, colder than any he had felt in the observation room, snaked down his spine. Below the title, prominently displayed, were two small clinical photographs. One was a headshot of him, Leo Vance, looking hopeful, even naive, from the day of their intake. It was labeled Participant A, Leo Vance. Next to it, another headshot, Clara. Her smile, though tentative, held a spark of her former warmth. It was labeled Participant B, Clara Vance. He stared at the page, at their faces, his own blood running cold. It was all there. Their suffering, their sacrifice, reduced to data points, to a case study on moral compromise. Their desperation, their love, their pain, all meticulously documented, analyzed, published for the academic world. He was not a savior. He was not a participant. He was a subject. And Clara, the love of his life, was participant B. Their ruined life, their broken relationship, their very humanity had been dissected and laid bare for science. The threshold protocol had promised to erase their worries, to secure their future. Instead, it had erased their very selves, leaving behind only the ghost of a love, haunted by the cold, clinical truth of human cruelty. There would be no escape, not for either of them.